welcome back to Room 237 as I continue my series of reviews for the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Now, my last video was for Elm Street 4, which is the first film in the series that I'm actually not a big fan of. I don't hate it, I don't totally dislike it, but I do have a lot of issues with it. It is one that I can watch, I just find it very forgettable, but it's not one that I can say I dislike. From here on out, we're pretty much in the realm of ones that I dislike. And it starts with this one, which this is the last one in the series to be titled A Nightmare on Elm Street. It was actually one of the final slasher films to be released in the 80s, released August 11th of 89, and it is Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. The concept of which, Freddy coming into the dreams of Alice's unborn baby, Alice from the previous film, was an idea that Wes Craven actually came up with. I believe it was Craven for Dream Warriors before the final script for that was written. But one of the producers, Sarah Risher, was pregnant at the time, and she didn't really like the idea of dealing with unborn babies, and I think there was even a scene where it was going to tear through the womb. But by this time, she's had the baby, and I think it was her to kind of go back to that idea, so that's what they toyed with. And I will say, on the surface, just total face value, Freddy terrorizing the dreams of someone's unborn baby is a very interesting concept, because the whole concept of Freddy, how do you keep him from chasing you? Stay awake. Well, fetuses are pretty much asleep. I think they even say in this 70% of the time, so they're always sleeping pretty much. So really hard to figure out what to do, keep everyone safe, and fight back when it's constantly going in and out of this dream world. But it doesn't really deliver on that at all. This is definitely one of the worst films in the series. It's definitely the worst one with the title Nightmare on Elm Street. Almost everything about this movie is just bad. They definitely went into the realm of campy and silly and humorous. Of course, not to the realm that Freddy's Dead would go to. But, which leads me to call this probably just the weakest of the series. There's not much to say about it. Everything about it, between just Freddy himself, all the makeup, which I'll get into, the concept, the performances of the actors, the characters, the direction, the climax and how they defeat Freddy, the humor, the horror aspects, everything is just incredibly weak. It's not too silly and dumb to talk about that, and it's not scary enough to compliment on that. It's just a dud. But I will get into all that. So, this one obviously went immediately into production after the release of The Dream Master, because that was a huge financial hit. Highest grossing of the series. Would stay that way till Freddy vs. Jason. So, immediately they got greedy, like they always do, and they had to cash in on that. They had no idea what they wanted to do. They just went back to this old idea. And similar to how Part 4, they started shooting with some ideas before they even had a final script or a director, this one was even more on the fly. There were so many different writers writing for this, and it was changing throughout production so many times that the Writers Guild was actually having a hard time figuring out who to give credit to. Ultimately, they gave it to Leslie Bohem. Apparently, most of her final script is the one that was used. But based on a story by John Skipp, Craig Spector, and Leslie Bohem, they were all constantly writing and adding stuff to it. It was directed by Stephen Hopkins, who wanted to go for a more dark and gothic look, which is present in some of the dream sequences where it looks very dungeony and castle-y, and it even shows us a bit of the Amanda Kruger attack of how Freddy was conceived, which I like that idea, and how Amanda is the key to stopping Freddy in this one. They just don't do a whole lot with it. And I do like how, the asylum is like this sort of Arkham Asylum snake pit, whereas all these stereotypical maniacs just wandering around together. She gets locked in. One of which is Robert Englund out of makeup, indicating he's the one that does impregnate Amanda. And coming to the cast is, of course, Robert Englund and Lisa Wilcox, returning as Alice and Freddy, but also returning is Danny Hassel as Dan for the previous film, and who was Nicholas Melee as Alice's father, who's now a recovering alcoholic. But other than that, I mean, we get Kelly Joel Minter as Yvonne, Erica Anderson as Greta, Beatrice Bopel, I hope I pronounced that correctly, as Amanda, and Joe Seeley as Mark. Also, appearing in Alice's dreams as the sort of 5 or 6 year old version of her baby, Jacob, Whit Hertford, who was in Poltergeist 2. He would go on to be in Jurassic Park. He was the one that says raptors aren't that scary. They're just like giant turkeys. And apparently, he was supposed to say the words, "Fuck you, Kruger," at the end. But they said where he was a minor, he wasn't allowed to say it, which is weird. I've seen movies from that time where kids are swearing. Maybe it comes down to the parents, I'm not sure. So he says, "School's out, Kruger," which is one of the many, many lame one-liners of this movie. It takes place a year later after the events of the fourth film, and Alice and Dan are now graduating high school. I'm assuming it's the same high school. They have this new group of friends who they are all so close with that when they take pictures together at graduation, even all their parents are together, like it's this lifelong clique. But you have the future model, the swimming athlete, Dan, Alice, and the comic book nerd. Sort of like a Breakfast Club kind of collection there. And to be honest, Freddy is so lame in this movie that Greta's overbearing mother telling her not to eat anything because, like she goes to lick a lollipop. It's like, Greta, cover girls don't put that in their body. These big eyes. And even in Greta's death scene, the way she's just like, Greta, eat at social... Like, she's scarier than Freddy is. And of course, and so they all graduate, and Dan and Alice are now dating. It's shown during the opening credits, which is up close of abs and chest and thighs, and with this blue lighting, trying to make it look more like an erotic thriller, which the male stand-in for that scene is actually Ken Kersinger, who would go on to stunt double Jason in Part 8 and play Jason in Freddy vs. Jason. Side note. Or, sorry, if it was the comment section, I'd have to do this. But so they conceive a child, and the first nightmare we see Freddy come back to life, which we see her as Amanda being attacked by all these maniacs. Then she gives birth to this demon Freddy baby who crawls into the pile of Freddy clothes from the ending of the last film. He fills out as the church kind of collapses. And then Freddy just stands up, and right from the first scene, you know this is going to be bad. Because he's got this really weird long arm. They don't really add any effects to his voice. He doesn't have the rotten Freddy teeth. He has his natural white straight teeth, which really stands out. And the very poor makeup, which I believe it was done by David Miller. And I know they were going for a more older look for Freddy, which doesn't make any sense because why would he age? But he just stands up and he's just like, "It's a boy." And then he does like this thing that's really kind of, that sets the tone for the whole movie. And basically it's her unborn baby, Jacob. Freddy is able to get to her and her friends through the unborn child's dreams. That's the movie. And this movie was so on the fly that it has so many different credits for makeup. I mean, each death scene seemed to have like a different special effects company behind it. I do know that the final sequence when Freddy and Alice are separating, and it kind of looks like the morphed faces from John Carpenter's The Thing, that was done by K&B, so cool. But yeah, David B. Miller did the makeup for Freddy. Dan's death sequence with the motorcycle was done by R. Christopher Biggs. I'm not. Also, Louis Lazara. It says makeup artist for Robert Englund, uncredited. And it doesn't say exactly who did Greta and... Does it even really say? There really are no makeup effects for Mark's death scene, but... Anyway. And yeah, where 4 had a shit ton of dream sequences and dream Freddy kills, this one is limited to 3 kills. And surprisingly, each one, this is kind of like the Friday the 13th Part 7 of the Elm Street series, where the MPA just cut the hell out of this movie. Now, Dan's and Greta's I can actually see being pretty graphic. And unfortunately, New Line has not released an uncut version of this yet. You can see clips of what was cut on the Never Sleep Again documentary. But I want to get who played Super Freddy. I want to say it was Ken Kersinger, but... oh, it was Michael Bailey Smith. Pluto from Hills Have Eyes remake. Papa Hades from the sequel to that. So, he plays Super Freddy. Now, there's not really any dream sequences I enjoy. I mean, Dan's is probably the most intricate, where he's on this bike and all the cables are going into his hand. Which first he's riding in his truck, and Freddy's next to him, and he like pours champagne all over himself, takes his arm off, sticks it to the side, and then like it buckles the claw in, while spewing some stupid lines. Then he's on a motorcycle, the cables are going into him and into his legs, and going all up inside of him, sort of creating this like skeleton. You know, so he looks like a skull, like a burnt skull. Which up close it looks kind of cool. But to me it's just so over the top looking. I always preferred the more subtle dream sequence kills. Like Phillips from Dream Warriors. And then of course he crashes. Conveniently right in front of Alice's diner. Greta, the one whose mom is overbearing about her weight, becoming a model. She gets the basically, like, it just makes me think of Mr. Creosote from Monty Python, The Meaning of Life, where Freddy is a waiter and he's just shoveling food into her. So you get this really kind of corny, like, giant cheeks, but like the mouth with food coming out of it, and she's just But the effect I do like is the stop motion. Again, I'm a huge sucker for stop motion. After Greta's death scene, which I will say that goes back and forth between her standing at the table like she's choking and being like the... But Alice, when she opens the fridge, the stop motion of all the food getting this green rot all over it, and then Greta leaning out, Freddy grabbing her, shutting the fridge. I do like the stop motion. Mark, who's the comic book guy, who's afraid of blood. I really do like the look of the comic book artwork. They must have really wanted to save money because the comic he finds, which I think was like Nightmares from Hell, is like this comic detailing the events of the film, but there's no color. They didn't want to get anyone to color it. But that's when he gets sucked in. And he gets to turn into his own comic creation, Phantom Prowler, which is the most impractical superhero I've ever seen in my life. Now, I will say this is a very campy, lame sequence and a very kind of lame death. As a comic book guy, I'm just kind of stoked to see what Freddy would do to a comic book guy and what a comic book death would look like. I do like the idea that he is turned into like this paper cutout of himself, which Freddy slashes him. It just looks like a chunk of paper ripped out, and all his color drains from him, and he's just black and white. Which the actor wanted to have a more gothic look to him, but instead they gave him blonde highlights and like a Screech Powers wardrobe. So all these vibrant colors and terrible MTV looking clothes. But there's a fight between, like, the Prowler has like this cowl with the slide out thing with the scope on it. Things that come out with pistols and a cape. It looks like he can't move well. And he says something like, "Time for you to die, you scar-faced limp dick," or something like that. And the guy that plays Mark is not a good actor. The first time we hear him speak, I swear he's doing like a Keanu. Like, "Oh, it's about this guy I read who like killed his sons because didn't like how they were running the kingdom or something." Huh. The only moderately strong character that has any kind of arc would be Yvonne, the swimmer, who at first doesn't believe shit, doesn't believe anything about Freddy until she's pulled into a dream, and then she sees it for herself, and then she ends up being the one that helps Alice at the end. Pretty much, if they find Amanda Kruger, which papers say she hung herself and they could never find her and prove it, if they find her and lay her to rest, they'll be able to stop Freddy. That's what Yvonne does when Alice goes into the dream world. The Jurassic Park kid, he pops up in dreams time to time, and as it goes on, he gets more pale and sickly looking. And the third act just makes no sense. You can tell they had 3 or 4 different people writing this fucking thing, and they just put everything together at the end. There are some wonky optical effects, like some 80s CGI, where like Freddy turns into these tarantulas and it just looks like a pure black animation all over the place. 80s optical effects, like when things like kind of like the Wizard Master green fireballs for Dream Warriors. But yeah, God, I hate the makeup of Freddy on this one. Granted, it's not as bad as in the 6th film, but we will get to that. Yeah, so Yvonne has the strongest arc. She goes from not believing and not knowing a thing about how to help to actually being the one that's able to save the day. The only line from Freddy that I like that sounds intimidating or menacing is whenever Amanda's around it's kind of like this force of good that Freddy can't be near. So, like, in the beginning, when Amanda says, you know, something to the effect of, I brought you into this world, now I have to take you out, or something. And I think this is the only line they really put that, like, effect on his voice to make it deeper, where he's just like, we'll see, bitch. We'll see. Only thing about Freddy that I like. Everything else is bad one-liners. And, yeah, this movie gets so campy that even when Mark and Super Freddy are going at it, it's like jacked Freddy with a lightning bolt and a cape. But, yeah, I can't even remember any of the one-liners, actually. Other than, like, when Alice can see inside the womb, and from, like, the inner womb wall, Freddy's face is sticking out. It's just like, hey, Alice, do you see a resemblance? Ha ha. And Freddy's defeated because when Yvonne finds Amanda, she's able to be free, enter the dream world somehow. And they're at the asylum. Freddy's locked in the same room with all the maniacs. They all attack him, rip his arm off. But then in the chapel, where Freddy's playing with Jacob, he has that stupid line where it's like he tied the sweater together, so it's just got like a flailing, limp arm. He's just like, hi, honey, new look, or something stupid. I do like the idea of having this gothic-y MC Escher setting. I thought that was very dreamlike and cool, where Jacob's trying to run away from Freddy, and it's like he goes up a stairway. It's like overhead shot of him coming down a stairway, but then it's like he comes out here, like the MC Escher stairs. He coming from all these different angles, and yeah, some 80s effects, like where it's like, I don't know, like green screen behind someone. But I like the idea. It is very gothic castle or dungeon, very dingy looking. So gothic MC Escher, I like that idea. But then for whatever reason, I think it's because it's supposed to be like Freddy's kid is inside her. They do this thing where Freddy's ripping out of her, and they have like the morphed face from the thing. And this is the effect that K&B did. But when Amanda shows up, like, they're connected at the waist, facing each other. But, like, his legs are coming out of the back of her. And it just looks like they're just kind of going, ah. Like, it looks so fucking silly. And then, to distract Freddy, Jacob has, like, the burnt face. And he's trying to do, like Kruger, teach me. And then Amanda says, use the power I gave you. And he barfs on him. He pukes. It looks like wind and like burnt, meaty Freddy stuff. That when it hits him, there's these long, meaty rope things, heads on it of the 3 victims from the film, that drag him towards Amanda. And then he turns back into Freddy Baby. Jacob turns back into Baby Baby. Amanda and Alice pick up their baby, and they just turn into a light that goes back inside of them. I guess to say that Amanda and Freddy are now one again, and she can be put to rest, therefore he can. It doesn't make any fucking sense. And then it just ends with Alice and Yvonne at the park with Alice's dad, with the baby. Camera pulls back to show a girl doing the jump rope. The horror aspects are so lame, and the campy, silly, stupid aspects are not as bad as 6, not as memorably bad as 6, which really just makes me feel that this is just weak, incredibly weak. The only strong character would be Yvonne, and that's just being generous because she does have an arc, but and going from the amount of Freddy with the amount of Freddy kills in part 4 to just go to 3 in this. And not only that, 3 that are pretty elaborate, and then 1 that's just all concept but not pulled off very well, only to have them all drastically cut. And also, this film is known for having the Bruce Dickinson solo version of Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. I can never find it when I watch this damn movie. And then the credits have a bad rap song. Bruce Dickinson, Iron Maiden, my favorite band, one of my favorite singers. And I can't even find it. Yeah, all the effects are pretty lame. Even K and B, I mean, who are just gods at everything they do. Even that morphing thing, it just looks kind of like stretched gum. Doesn't look that good. And yeah, it doesn't feel as much of a rushed product as Part 4, but it's so disjointed and so uneven and so incoherent that it does feel rushed. And like, there's no real solid ideas, and there is this undercurrent of, and this is considered one of the more darker ones in the series, I think, because of this aspect. This undercurrent of abortion and custody, losing your child, and it just kind of makes it feel like this dark cloud over. It's just more gloomy, like not dark in an interesting way. And plus, by this time, slasher films were fucking dead. I mean, 89, yeah, you had movies like Intruder, which is fun as hell. But franchises like this, when you get up to Part 5 or Part 8, which is when 89, that's when Friday the 13th Part 8 came out, 80 slashers were done. And this movie is just so weak. There's no other way I can really describe it other than weak. It is the weakest, I can say. Not laughably bad like 6 or infuriating like 6. It's just a weak dud. I've never liked this film. Even when I was a kid, I always forget what happens in it. And yeah. And I do know that this is Robert Englund's least favorite film of the series, and it shows. I mean, he's still giving it his all, but yeah. Definitely the worst with the On Elm Street banner, but like the original trailer, save the best for last. I'll get to this next. And yeah, the best rant. So yeah, we're now in the shit. So stay tuned for what I remember to be the worst of the series, Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. This was Part 5. It sucks in a very depressing dud. We gotta keep it going as fast as we can kind of way, cash in way, and it shows. But I thank you for watching.